Have you ever seen a recording? What? Have you ever seen a coding practice that just bothered you? Just got under your skin? I know I have. Humans are great at overcomplicating things, and programming is no exception. As a software developer who's been in the industry for a while, I've seen lots of anti-patterns and questionable practices over the years, some of which are real head scratchers. Now, to be clear, this video is in no way meant to shame anyone. I know that I make my fair share of dumb mistakes. In fact, I think that people should make mistakes while learning and do things the wrong way while they're stumbling through trying to learn new technologies and new frameworks. But I do want to highlight one problematic pattern that I've found and hopefully show the right way to do it instead. So let's get right into it. The reducer function in JavaScript is one of the most misused in my opinion. It's a beautifully elegant function, yet it can quickly become unmanageable if we're not careful. Take this example for instance. So given an array of pets, let's say we want to find certain pets within that array. So one way to pull this off would be to pass it through a reducer, and then we have our filtered array, right? However, there is a better solution for this. So there's a JavaScript function that is specifically designed to filter arrays. It's called filter. And this is going to yield the same result. Dog, cat. Or people sometimes use the reducer function to map an array to new values. So look at this people array for instance. We have an array of people, each element has an ID, name, and profession. And one syntactically correct way to do this would be to pass it through reducer, and each iteration, we simply push the result to people IDs. But like the previous example, there's a better function for this. It's called map. And this gives us the same result and is easier to read. So the examples above are unnecessarily obtuse. Using reducers in the examples above obfuscates what the code's actually doing. You might think you're being clever, but you're actually making life more difficult for the unlucky soul that will inherit your code base, which might be you in the future. Future you. So what should reducer be used for? Here are all the cases I can think of. Summing, multiplying, or performing some aggregate math calculation. Aggregate meaning that we're just combining some things together. Reducing a collection down to a single value, i.e. reduce. Or using Redux. Okay, so we're going to walk through each of these examples one by one. Example number one, performing an aggregate math calculation. So math calculations are the main intent behind why the reduce function exists in the first place. You take an input array and the resulting output is a number. So let's say that we have an array of numbers. We're going to get our sum. This is going to be numbers.reduce. Pass a anonymous function, a, b, and then we return a plus b. This is an aggregate. It's going to aggregate the sum. It's going to sum up all these individual numbers and tell us what they are. So if we console log out our sum, we get 2795. Okay. The same thing can also be used to create a product. So same principle, but instead of adding, we multiply. Well, it actually starts with the first element in and then progressively multiplies it by the next element. So like 948 multiplied by 245 multiplied by 74, so on and so on. A reducer function is also really useful for averaging. So taking a, b, you add a and b, and then you divide it by the numbers dot length. And so if we log that bad boy out, we get the average, the median value between all of these different numbers. So that is an aggregate math calculation. But even for many math calculations, it doesn't make sense to use a reducer. Take this guy, for example. I mean, look at this guy. Do you know what's going on? Reducer. If you want to find a max, this is perfectly and syntactically correct. If we log out the max, we can verify, looking through this array, that 991 is the maximum number. But this unnecessarily complicates things. This is kind of hard to read. And there's also a far simpler way of doing this by just doing math.max, and it gives us the same result. Similarly, we can find the min. Now, a reducer really shines when you're performing math calculations on objects. Okay, let's say that we have an array of grades, like school grades. And so we can't just, sum these objects together because math.max expects to receive an array of numbers. So this is not going to work. It's going to return not a number. It doesn't know what to do with objects. But to sum up things correctly, we can use a reducer. So to get our sum weights, we can use a reducer, pass in our grade. That's going to be the individual instance in this iteration, or the individual element, I should say. And then we're adding the grade.weight to the sum, and we just provide some defaults here in case that grade.weight is nil. And then for average grade, we just do grade.grade. I know it's not the best kind of lookup there, but naming things is hard. And then for average weighted grade, we multiply the grade by its weight, getting the weighted grade. And so we can console.log all these things out, and voila. So maths on objects is a great use case for reducers. All right, another great use case for reducers is reducing a collection down to a single value. So reducing it. So this is also converting the array to another data type. Take this example for instance. We have an array of users, each of a user type. If you're not familiar with TypeScript, don't worry too much about that syntax. Just know that each user has a name, an age, an annual salary, and an occupation. Let's say that we wanted to map this array of people to an object so that we can look up users by their ID, like kind of a hash map sort of thing. So here's what we could do. We could use users.reduce, and then the user is going to be the element inside of this iteration, and then we can simply assign this object to this map item and then return the map. So it would be console.log our users map. We're going to get a nice map of our users mapped according to their ID. So we can look up whichever user we want by their ID, and so on and so forth. Let's go one step further and calculate each user's annual salary percentile. So like where they rank according to other people, because we all like to compare ourselves. That is the human element. All right, so we have our max salary here, and then users map. We're doing the annual salary divided by max salary, and that's going to return a new map where they have a new property added to this map called salary percentile. So let's log that bad boy out. So we have this nice object here. Again, we can look up by our array, and look, the salary percentile of Bob is in 88 percentile, and then Jill is in the 61 percentile. Lori is a graphic designer and is in the 38 percentile. Then Holly is in the 61%. So you get the idea. You might be asking, that's all good and well, but would we actually use this in the real world? One example of how I actually used this in a recent project was when I used a reducer to compose a route object for React navigation. So here's the solution I came up with. So here's the meat of it right here. We do our cloned routes.reduce. And so all we do is we return a new object where the screen is the current, and then we accumulate everything else on the params. And so we end up with this nice nested structure. So if we do like uncomment this guy, you can see that we have things that are nested inside of params, which is what React navigation expects. And each of these layers can be thought of as an iteration of the reducer. So that's a perfect use case for using a reducer, because we take an array of these paths here and we compose a new object that has nested properties based on that original array. So we're reducing it down to one object. So you can think of it that way. I actually use this code on a production app. And the third and final use case for using a reducer, in my opinion, is Redux. But of course, the Redux library uses array.prototype.reduce under the hood to reduce everything down to a single state object. Dan Abramov goes through a really good talk on this, where he talks through what is a reducer, what's it's used for, and why we don't mutate state. I highly recommend checking out that video if you have not. It's a great crash course in the Reducer. And even if you don't use Redux, he teaches a lot of great concepts and really important concepts to understand. So yep, do check that out definitely if you haven't yet. So yeah, many people say that Redux is no longer needed because of React context. However, I found that Redux is an invaluable resource, especially when dealing with a very complex app and you want to keep track of, specific actions and keep track of your state and determine when things were changed and why they changed. Redux is absolutely great with that respect. And you can actually combine both of these things together by using the React use reducer hook. I won't get into that right now in this video. It's kind of beyond the scope of things, but that does exist for those who want to kind of blend the worlds of using React context and using a reducer as well. So what I've learned in almost 10 years of software development is this: there's no one tool for the job that's better than all other tools. Rather, each tool has a specific purpose, and there are always trade-offs for whatever tool you end up choosing. So choose your tools carefully, my friends. So in summary, Array.prototype.reduce is another tool for the toolbox. Before using a reducer, ask yourself, do I need this? Is there another way? Is there a simpler way? Use a reducer if and only if you need to reduce something. So that's hopefully keeps it kind of simple and easy to remember, like when is a good use case to use a reducer. You'll need to reduce something. So are there any other uses for reduce that I missed? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, if you like this sort of content, please do like and
Reducer.
All right, that's gonna do it for now. This is a wrap. Go out there, use reduce, use other tools, keep building awesome things, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care of yourselves.